Close your eyes and imagine. What if the things in life that cause us the greatest pain, the things that bring us grief, are challenges? Challenges designed to help us grow, to ultimately become what we were always meant to be. We feel like we've been buried, but what if, like a seed, we've been planted? And having been planted, we grow to become a mighty tree. Now, open your eyes. Open your eyes to this way of viewing life. Come with me as we explore your true, infinite, eternal nature. This is Grief to Growth, and I am your host, Brian Smith. So Claudia asks, how did we get to be so stupid about the afterlife? How did it happen that we as a culture learned not to talk about it, to fear it, to see death as always a tragedy, etc.? From my understanding about this is a relatively recent phenomenon. I'm going to say in the last couple hundred, maybe 300 or 400 years, which in the course of mankind is a relatively quick amount of time, a small amount of time. And I think for most of man's existence, we've known our true nature. We've known that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. If you look at indigenous cultures around the world, even to today, they still don't seem to struggle with that. It's modern man that has a struggle with it. Now, what happened is we got a little bit too big for our britches, in my opinion. I think we let our intellects take over and rule our hearts to tell us what we truly are. And science and religion, whereas at one time they were one, and people that studied science studied the universe because they believed in a God, and an orderly God would create an orderly universe. And you can know more about the Creator by studying His creation. And we went so far as to when these two wouldn't stay in their own lanes, when religion was trying to restrict science by saying things like, of course, the Earth has to be at the center of the solar system, and things like the Earth is flat, etc., that were religious principles instead of scientific principles. They kind of split because science looked at this and said, you're restricting me too much. And then science said, well, if we can't study it, then it must not exist. So these two kind of go at it, whereas religion says we're going to have our realm, which will be all the spiritual and the supernatural, and science will only study what we call, quote unquote, the natural. The only thing I think we can know for sure is that we are consciousness, that we are conscious, that we have perceptions. As Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. This is really all we know. Everything else, it's subjective. Even things that we consider objective, things that we view together, they're only objective because more than one person is perceiving them at a time. So when science denies the very existence of consciousness, as some have done, some philosophers have wrapped themselves so much in knots that they say consciousness is an illusion. And they say that consciousness, whatever it is we perceive, arises from the material. But since it's not material, it itself can't be real. It gets us all tied up in knots. And that's why I think we are so lost and why we are so quote unquote stupid when it comes to the afterlife. Now, science has been extremely successful. We have created all kinds of incredible things with science. We can study things. We can learn things. We have a lifestyle now where we can speak wirelessly across the world instantaneously, where we can create medicines, where we can create medical miracles in a sense, things that would have been miraculous a few years ago. So people kind of threw out and said, we don't need religion. We don't need philosophy anymore. And that included any belief in the afterlife. The thing is, though, I think people are very lost right now because of this. Swedenborg, I'm a big fan of Swedenborg. Swedenborg even talks about this back in his time, which was in the 18th century. And he says that there were earlier periods of what he calls the church or mankind state, where man was more connected to the afterlife, where it was actually very natural to have afterlife communications, after-death communications. And the veil between the spirit world and the material world were not so thick. But again, we kind of built this up ourselves by our intellectual knowledge and our denial of the afterlife and of what goes on after we die and actually before we're born, for that matter. So I think that's where we got lost, in particular, I think, in Western modern culture. I think the good news is that we have been lost for so long that we're realizing that we're lost. People are realizing that they're not satisfied with the answers that they're getting from science. Science is starting to see things are not as Newtonian as they thought they were, where everything is just a matter of interactions and this deterministic point of view that if you wound up the universe like a clock and started it, that it would run in a manner that you could predict if you knew all the variables. We're starting to understand that there are potentialities, that there is free will, that there is some amount of randomness in our system, and these things are kind of going against that view. Things like the double slit experiment is blowing our minds. Things like quantum mechanics, things at the very small scale and things at the very fast scale as things speed up toward the speed of light. Things get really weird. And as we're starting to understand that, we're realizing our view of the universe is not complete. Now, the thing about science as we take it is it can't answer our most fundamental questions like what started it all. The way that we look at the universe now, everything is based on cause and effect, and there has to be a cause for there to be an effect. And we can trace this back, I guess, most recently to what we call the Big Bang. But we can't go any further than that. And that's based on a materialistic understanding. We can't get outside of this materialistic paradigm that says everything started when time and space started. So that's the conundrum that we find ourselves in. So hopefully that answers your question as to how we got to where we are and give you a little hope. I think that we are about to turn the corner as we start to approach the limits of science. It's really interesting because there have been several times in humankind when we thought we've known pretty much everything there is to know. And we reached that point again a couple hundred years ago and said, we pretty much know everything there is to know. And we're, I think, being humbled by that a little bit now as we're reaching those limits and we're realizing we're going to have to break out of those paradigms to reach beyond the limits that we've got now with this materialistic point of view. So that's the way I see it. If you have any questions, let me know. If you have any thoughts, I'd love to hear them. Thanks. I'm excited to announce I have a great new resource. It's called GEMS, 4 Steps to Move from Grief to Joy. And what it is, it's 4 things that I've found that I do on a daily basis to help me to navigate my grief. And I'm offering it to you free of charge. It's a free download. Just go to my website, www.grieftogrowth.com/gems, GEMS, and grab it there for free. I hope you enjoy it.